Welcome to the shop of Joe Petto. Here, you'll find the most amazing gadgets on Earth. Each toy is unique.
What a terrible accident. Sarah, you think this is an accident? Look.
Each specially designed by the craftsman himself.
Buck, where did all these toys come from? What?
Sarah, what do you know about that old guy from the toy store? I wonder if I told you he was arrested for maiming some kids several years ago.
What reason could he have to hurt innocent children?
Joe Petto always wanted a real boy.
Where's Derek? He took him.
Who took him? Where? Who?
The man from the toy store.
But he'll have to make what he can get.
All you need is a little of that, and a little of that, and a little of that.
From the producer of Bride of Reanimator.
I want my boy. What have you done with him?
I'm your son now, not him.
With special effects by Screaming Mad George Inc. of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. Comes the most incredible night yet. Mickey Rooney stars in Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, The Toymaker.
The nightmare began with Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Need a ride, Santa Claus?
Oh, no, not exactly.
But it isn't over yet. In fact, the ultimate nightmare is about to begin all over again.
Hey, you little bastard!
All Ricky ever wanted was a little kindness.
Very naughty.
And all he ever got was pain.
He was naughty.
Now he wants revenge. And this time,
Garbage day!
he's going to get it. Step by step, weapon by weapon.
Naughty.
Victim by victim. The terror's coming home, and he's all grown up. Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 2.
I've got a present for you!
The terrifying suspense shocker you've been waiting for. Last time it thrilled you. This time,
Bingo!
it'll kill you. Silent Night Releasing Corporation presents Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 2.
There are certain images burned so deeply into childhood memory that no amount of therapy can fully dislodge them, and for an entire generation of American kids, one of those images is Santa Claus, red suit, black boots, standing at the top of the stairs, and he is absolutely not there to deliver presents. Silent Night. Deadly Night arrived in theaters in November of 1984 and caused one of the most genuine public uproars a horror film had managed in years. Parent groups picketed cinemas, television personalities demanded the film be pulled, and TriStar Pictures, spooked by the backlash, yanked it from screens after just 2 weeks, which of course made every teenager in America desperate to find it at their local video rental store. That controversy did not kill the franchise. It launched one. What followed over the next 7 years was one of the stranger creative journeys in slasher history. 5 films, multiple directors, a mythology that started tight and personal, then splintered in directions no one could have predicted from that original premise of a traumatized orphan in a Santa suit. Some entries built carefully on what came before. Others seemed to forget the earlier films existed entirely and just borrowed the title. Today we are ranking all 5 of them, from the one that should have stayed buried in the snow to the one that actually deserved the reputation this franchise was always fighting to earn. Fair warning, the number 1 spot may not be where you expect it. We will get there. Settle in. 5 films, 1984 to 1991. Let's begin.
Police continue to investigate the bizarre suicide.
An inexplicable phenomenon.
No ID. They said
You're one of us now.
Join the club.
If you picked up this VHS at Blockbuster expecting Santa Claus and a body count, the opening 10 minutes of Initiation delivered something closer to a fever dream about a cult, giant insects, and a woman spontaneously combusting on a Los Angeles rooftop. Welcome to the bottom of the ranking. Directed by Brian Yuzna, The man behind Society and the Reanimator sequel, Initiation, makes a bold creative decision right out of the gate. It completely abandons everything the previous 3 films established. No Billy, no Ricky, no Santa mythology whatsoever. What replaces it is a body horror story about a female journalist named Kim who stumbles into a witch's coven operating out of a downtown Los Angeles bookshop. Kim is drawn deeper into the coven's rituals after witnessing the rooftop death, and the women surrounding her, led by a character named Fema, begin putting her through a series of increasingly disturbing initiations. She experiences visions, physical transformations, and a gradual loss of her own identity as the cult's influence tightens around her. Her boyfriend and his family become entangled in the danger as Kim struggles to separate what is real from what the coven is making her see and feel. The film builds toward a climax rooted in occult ritual rather than slasher mechanics, leaning on Yuzna's trademark body horror sensibility to generate its scares. Compared to Part 3, which we will get to shortly, there is at least a pulse here. The practical effects, handled partly by Screaming Mad George, have a genuinely queasy imagination to them. But when measured against what a Silent Night, Deadly Night film is supposed to deliver, Initiation feels less like a sequel and more like an unrelated script that had the franchise title stapled to it at the last moment by a distributor who needed a recognizable brand on the box. The moment most likely to lodge in memory is a larva sequence that takes practical body horror into genuinely uncomfortable territory. It is the kind of scene that makes you put down whatever snack you were holding and not pick it up again for a while. Credit where it is due, Yuzna committed fully to the bit. Initiation is not without ambition, and in a vacuum as a standalone piece of early 90s cult horror, it has its defenders. But as a Silent Night, Deadly Night film, it is an almost complete creative disconnect, a left turn so sharp it flew off the road entirely. It did not damage the franchise so much as simply opt out of being part of it. The film sitting just above it at least remembered what series it belonged to, even if remembering was not quite enough to save it.
Enter a world of dreams.
Laura, tell me what you saw in your dream.
I told you, Dr. Newberry. Santa Claus.
A world of silence.
Subject may be making contact.
I don't want to see the future or the past. I just want to be normal.
A world of madness.
No one is normal.
A world that can't be ignored.
She likes it, loves it. She can't resist it. She wants to penetrate his mind, see what he sees.
He was a little boy, and then something happened. Something terrible.
Because when the dream is over,
I don't know what's going on here, but whatever it is,
the nightmare begins. The Yuletide terror returns.
His brain was surgically reconstructed.
If you don't mind my saying, I'd have pulled his plug.
Even his life was of value.
With the saga that shocked a nation.
If Initiation opted out of the franchise entirely, Part 3 stayed in the room but spent most of its runtime staring blankly at the wall. Directed by Monty Hellman, a filmmaker with genuine art house credentials dating back to the 60s, Better Watch Out is the kind of horror sequel that makes you wonder how so many interesting people ended up making something so inert. The film picks up directly from where Part 2 left off, with Ricky Caldwell, Billy's younger brother, having survived his Part 2 rampage but now lying in a coma in a hospital research facility. A blind psychic teenager named Laura is recruited by a scientist named Dr. Newberry to participate in experimental sessions where she mentally connects with the comatose Ricky. The sessions work perhaps a little too well. Ricky wakes up and he is not grateful. He rises from his hospital bed wearing a bizarre transparent dome over the top of his skull, a visual that is equal parts unsettling and unintentionally comic, and begins making his way toward Laura, guided by their psychic link. Laura, her brother, and her brother's girlfriend are heading to their grandmother's house for Christmas, and Ricky follows, cutting a slow and methodical path through anyone unfortunate enough to cross him along the way. The psychic connection between Laura and Ricky gives the film its central tension, with Laura experiencing flashes of Ricky's perspective as he closes the distance between them. Richard Bamer appears as Dr. Newberry, and Robert Culp shows up as a detective trying to piece together what has escaped from the hospital. The film tries to build a slow-burn psychological atmosphere rather than leaning on set-piece scares, which is an understandable creative choice given Hellman's background, but the pacing drags so severely in the second act that the burn goes almost completely cold before the finale arrives. The most memorable element, and it is memorable entirely for the wrong reasons, is that transparent skull dome on Ricky's head. It was apparently meant to show the extent of his brain injuries, and to give him a visually distinctive look to separate him from the Santa suit imagery of the earlier films. What it actually does is make every scene he appears in slightly difficult to take seriously, which is a significant problem for a film trying to build genuine dread. Better Watch Out represents the franchise hitting a creative wall at speed. The psychic angle had potential, the returning mythology gave it a reason to exist, and Monty Hellman is not a filmmaker without talent. But good intentions and an interesting premise are not sufficient substitutes for momentum, and this film has almost none. It is the entry the franchise needed to crawl out from under before it could try anything worthwhile again. And crawl it did, though the next step up the ladder comes with its own very particular set of problems that have since become the stuff of horror legend.
Welcome to the shop of Joe Petto. Here, you'll find the most amazing gadgets on Earth. Each toy is unique.
What a terrible accident. Sarah, you think this is an accident? Look.
Each specially designed by the craftsman himself.
Buck, where did all these toys come from?
Sarah, what do you know about that old guy from the toy store? I wonder if I told you he was arrested for maiming some kids several years ago.
What reason could he have to hurt innocent children?
Joe Petto always wanted a real boy.
Where's Derek? He took him.
Who took him? Where? Who?
The man from the toy store.
But he'll have to make what he can get.
All you need is a little of that, and a little of that, and a little of that.
From the producer of Bride of Reanimator.
I want my boy! What have you done with him? I'm your son now, not him.
With special effects by Screaming Mad George Inc. of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. Comes the most incredible night yet. Mickey Rooney stars in Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, The Toymaker.
There is something almost admirable about a franchise that, after 2 consecutive entries that largely abandoned or exhausted its original premise, decides to reinvent itself around killer toys and a deeply unsettling mall Santa with a secret. The Toymaker is not a great film, but it is the most purely entertaining of the middle entries, and in this particular franchise that counts for more than it might elsewhere. Directed by Martin Kitrosser, who had worked as a screenwriter on several Friday the 13th films, The Toymaker follows a young boy named Derek who witnesses something traumatic outside his home on Christmas Eve and subsequently stops speaking entirely. His mother, Sarah, struggling to hold the household together while her husband has mysteriously vanished, tries to reconnect with Derek through the normal rituals of the holiday season. She takes him to a toy shop run by a peculiar craftsman named Joe Petto, and yes, the film is entirely aware of what that name suggests and leans into it with a kind of gleeful shamelessness. Joe's son Pino, a strange and intensely odd young man who seems to have an unhealthy attachment to both his father and to Sarah, begins inserting himself into their lives in ways that grow increasingly threatening. The toys coming out of Joe's shop begin finding their way into Derek's bedroom, and these are not ordinary toys. They crawl, they pursue, and they are built with a mechanical hostility that makes every unwrapping feel like a potential disaster. The film weaves in a connection to the broader Silent Night, Deadly Night mythology through a returning character from Part 2, giving it slightly more franchise continuity than either Part 3 or Part 4 managed, though the connection is thin enough that casual viewers might miss it entirely. Mickey Rooney appears as Joe Petto, which carries its own layer of strange cultural irony, given that Rooney had been among the most vocal public critics of the original 1984 film, calling it morally offensive and demanding it be pulled from theaters. Here he is 7 years later, collecting a paycheck from the very franchise he helped attack. The production wisely never draws attention to this fact, but horror fans of the era certainly noticed. The standout moment is a sequence involving a toy that attaches itself to a character's face with a kind of relentless mechanical determination that manages to be both darkly comic and genuinely creepy in equal measure. It is the scene that makes the film worth tracking down, the moment where Kitrosser's instincts as a franchise horror veteran click into gear and deliver something that feels earned rather than accidental. The Toymaker lands in the middle of this ranking because it does exactly what a mid-tier franchise entry should do. It keeps the energy moving, it delivers a handful of memorable moments, and it leaves the viewer entertained without ever threatening to be anything more than a competent and occasionally inspired piece of holiday horror. It is the franchise's most watchable lesser entry, which in a series with this track record is genuine praise. From the middle of the pack we move upward now, and the next entry is where things get genuinely complicated, because it is simultaneously one of the most technically embarrassing films in the franchise and one of the most purely enjoyable things it ever produced.
The nightmare began with Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Need a ride, Santa Claus?
Well, no, not exactly.
But it isn't over yet. In fact, the ultimate nightmare is about to begin all over again.
Hey, you little bastard!
All Ricky ever wanted was a little kindness.
Very naughty.
And all he ever got was pain.
She was naughty.
Now he wants revenge. This time,
Garbage day!
he's going to get it. Step by step, weapon by weapon. Victim by victim. The terror's coming home, and he's all grown up. Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 2.
I've got a present for you!
Terrifying suspense shocker you've been waiting for. Last time it thrilled you. This time,
Bingo!
it'll kill you. Silent Night Releasing Corporation presents Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 2.
There are sequels that surpass their predecessors, sequels that merely repeat them, and then there is Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, a film that spent roughly the first 40 minutes of its runtime simply replaying footage from the original film and somehow still managed to become the most quoted, most memed, and most gleefully beloved entry in the entire franchise. It should not work. It absolutely should not work. And yet here we are. Directed by Lee Harry on a budget that was reportedly so thin it made the original look like a studio production, Part 2 follows Ricky Caldwell, the younger brother of Billy from the first film, now grown up and sitting across from a prison psychiatrist named Dr. Anderson. Ricky is recounting his life story, which conveniently allows the film to replay enormous chunks of the original Silent Night, Deadly Night through flashback sequences. These recycled segments were not a stylistic choice born of creative ambition. The production simply could not afford to shoot enough new material to fill a feature-length runtime, so existing footage was licensed and reused on a scale that is staggering even by low-budget sequel standards. Estimates suggest that nearly half of the finished film consists of footage lifted directly from the 1984 original. When the flashbacks finally exhaust themselves and the film commits to its own present-day story, Ricky escapes from custody and embarks on a rampage through a suburban neighborhood that is shot with a kind of cheerful incompetence that has since become genuinely legendary among cult horror fans. He steals a gun. He walks down a quiet residential street. He shoots at everything in sight. He delivers the line. You know the line. If you have spent any time in horror fan circles online or at conventions, you have encountered the line, and if somehow you have not, the experience of hearing it in context for the first time is something that cannot be adequately prepared for or described. It arrives with the full weight of unintentional comic perfection, delivered by actor Eric Freeman with a physical intensity so wildly disproportionate to the material that it crosses completely through the barrier separating bad acting from genuine performance art. Freeman's eyebrow work alone has been the subject of more fan discussion than the entire plot of Part 3 and Part 4 combined. The film also introduces the romantic subplot between Ricky and a young woman named Jennifer, which exists primarily to give Ricky something to lose before the third act, and a villain figure named Chip who exists primarily to give Ricky a reason to lose it. Neither character is written with any particular depth, but Freeman's commitment to every single scene he appears in makes the human drama surprisingly watchable in a way that has nothing to do with conventional dramatic craft. The standout moment is, without question, the suburban rampage sequence. It has been clipped, captioned, shared, and referenced so many times across so many corners of internet culture that it has achieved a kind of immortality the film's original creative team could never have anticipated. It is the sequence that transformed a cheap, rushed, technically compromised sequel into a cult touchstone, and it did so entirely on the strength of one actor's magnificent refusal to underplay anything. Part 2 sits at number 2 in this ranking not despite its flaws, but partially because of them. It is the entry that accidentally captured something the franchise never managed to bottle on purpose: genuine, infectious, replayable fun. It is a bad film that is an absolute joy to watch, and in the specific ecosystem of late 80s slasher sequels, that combination is rarer and more valuable than it might sound. Which brings us finally to the film that started everything, the one that made parents march in front of movie theaters, the one that made studio executives panic, the one that, when you strip away the controversy and the nostalgia and the cultural mythology surrounding it, turns out to have actually earned its reputation.
Was the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. Now try and survive Christmas. Silent Night. Deadly Night.
Some films earn their notoriety. Some films have notoriety thrust upon them by circumstances they never anticipated. The original Silent Night, Deadly Night managed both simultaneously, and 4 decades later it stands as something genuinely rare in the slasher genre. A film that was condemned by people who had not seen it, defended by people who had, and ultimately vindicated by time in a way that feels almost poetic, given how brutally it was treated upon release. Directed by Charles E. Sellier Jr., a filmmaker whose previous work had been almost exclusively in family-friendly Christian entertainment, Silent Night, Deadly Night opens not with a cheap shock but with a genuinely unsettling portrait of childhood trauma. Young Billy Chapman witnesses the murder of his parents on Christmas Eve at the hands of a man dressed as Santa Claus. He and his infant brother Ricky are subsequently placed in a Catholic orphanage run by a strict and psychologically severe Mother Superior, whose approach to discipline involves punishment, shame, and a rigid moral framework that equates any expression of human weakness with sin. The film takes its time with Billy's upbringing in a way that distinguishes it from virtually every other slasher of the era. We watch him grow from a traumatized child into a troubled teenager, carrying the weight of that Christmas Eve night alongside the damage inflicted by years of institutional harshness. When Billy is placed as a young adult into a job at a toy store and is then required by his well-meaning employer to dress as Santa Claus for the holiday season, the psychological architecture the film has carefully constructed begins to collapse inward. The killings that follow are not random. They emerge from a specific and coherent internal logic rooted in Billy's warped understanding of punishment and naughtiness, concepts drilled into him by Mother Superior across years of childhood. He does not kill because he is evil in the conventional slasher sense. He kills because he has been taught, in the most formative years of his life, that punishment is the appropriate response to moral failure, and he has now appointed himself the instrument of that punishment. It is a more sophisticated psychological framework than the genre typically bothered with in 1984, and it gives the film a weight and a genuine unease that most of its contemporaries never achieved. The supporting performances, particularly Lillian Chauvin as Mother Superior, are stronger than the material strictly required, and Sellier's direction is more controlled and atmospheric than his background would have suggested possible. The film was shot on a modest budget, but it uses its locations, particularly the orphanage and the snow-covered exteriors, with a visual intelligence that keeps the dread consistently present even in quieter scenes. The moment that crystallized the public outrage and has never entirely left the cultural conversation is the scene involving a young woman on a sled, which arrives with a suddenness and a cold efficiency that genuinely earns its reputation as one of the more startling set pieces in 80s slasher cinema. It is not gratuitous for its own sake. Within the film's internal logic, it lands with the weight of inevitability, which is what separates it from simple shock value and what made it so genuinely disturbing to audiences who encountered it without warning. The original Silent Night, Deadly Night is the unambiguous peak of this franchise for one simple reason. It is the only entry that fully committed to treating its premise as something worth taking seriously. Every sequel, in one way or another, was running either toward or away from what this film established. The ones that ran away got lost. The ones that ran toward it never quite caught up. That is the clearest possible measure of an original that actually did something right, something the controversy surrounding its release spent years obscuring but could never ultimately erase. 5 films, 7 years. One franchise that began with genuine psychological ambition, got buried under studio pressure and shrinking budgets, took 2 deeply strange detours into cult horror and killer toys, and somehow still managed to produce one legitimate slasher classic worth defending in any conversation about the genre. Ranking the Silent Night, Deadly Night series is not really an exercise in film criticism. It is an exercise in memory. If you first encountered the original on a grainy VHS tape at a friend's house with the volume turned low so the parents downstairs would not hear, that experience is baked into how you feel about everything that followed. The sequels did not exist in a vacuum. They existed in the long shadow of that first Christmas Eve image, and none of them ever fully escaped it. Here's the question worth taking to the comments. Which entry in this franchise means the most to you personally? And does your answer change depending on whether you saw it as a kid or discovered it later? Because this is a series where the answer to that question varies more wildly from fan to fan than almost any other slasher franchise of the era. And that kind of personal investment is exactly what keeps people talking about a film that studio executives tried to erase from existence 40 years ago. If you enjoyed this ranking, hit like, subscribe, and drop your own list in the comments below. And if you think we got the order completely wrong, we genuinely want to hear why. Another franchise is coming, multiple decades of sequels, a killer even more iconic than a man in a Santa suit. Stay tuned.